you ever had to give a speech, but you really didn't have that much time to prepare? Oh, sure, you meant to prepare. You had it all planned out, what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, all the time you're going to spend on working on things, but somehow time just got away from you, and now here it is, and your speech is coming up real soon, and you aren't quite ready. In which quite ready means you've planned it and practiced it and know what you're going to say. You're kind of at the point you know what you want to talk about, but you're not quite sure how to give a speech. The strange thing about presentations is that when we get up in front of people, we think it's a big deal. You know, you got to prepare for it. You got to get ready. And that's true. It is a big deal. And it's great when you've got all this time to prepare for it. If you've got days to prepare for something, great. If you've got weeks to prepare for something, fine. If you can do a month to prepare, even better. But in the real world, things come down to the last moment, and suddenly, there you go, and it's time to present. What do? Well, the good news is that this needn't be a disaster, because hopefully you know what you're talking about. If you don't know what you're talking about, you might as well stop right now. If you think you're going to give a presentation on something you know nothing about, or don't really understand, or haven't done before, or haven't practiced, then this speech simply isn't going to happen. You can't do a speech out of ignorance. What I'm talking about, though, is the time when you know what you're going to say. You've got an idea about what you're going to say. You're just trying to figure out how do you take what you know and turn it into a presentation. And the good news is, it's not that tough. And today you will learn the most important thing it is to take a speech and turn it into a presentation. In fact, you will learn about the two most important things you have to have. And the third one, you need to have it, but not that big a deal. And the two most important things you have to have are introduction and a conclusion. Now you're probably saying, Tim, I know you have to have an introduction and a conclusion. I'm not an idiot. What you really have to have is you have to have something that catches people's attention. Just like that. Right at the beginning, it gets them involved and it gets them thinking, I want to find out more about this. If you can hook people in there like that with your introduction, you're in a good situation. Things are going well. And you have to have a solid conclusion. Conclusion that ties things together and gets people thinking, what are the next steps? What should I be doing now? Where do I go from here? You see, people remember most the beginning of things and the end of things. They tend to forget what happens all in the middle. So if you don't have a lot of time to prepare, you need a solid introduction. A solid introduction gets people involved and gets them thinking, I'd better pay attention. And solid conclusion gets them thinking, where do I go from here? Unfortunately, in presentations, a lot of people spend so much time working on the presentation itself, they never bother on the introduction or the conclusion. So even if they finally get all that stuff figured out, what they're going to say, they don't know how to begin it, and they definitely don't know how to end it. So today, you will learn about what's the right way to begin things. Get people involved and get them hooked. What are some common things that you can do? Some easy, simple things you can do to get people hooked in what you're saying. And how do you finish things? How do you wrap things up? How do you get things going so they're leading somewhere? So they're going from here somewhere else. And you're going to learn all about that right now. You've got 30 seconds. use it well. 30 seconds to capture the audience, pull them into your speech. Because if you don't have their attention after 30 seconds, that audience is gone. They're not going to pay any more attention to what you have to say, no matter how good it is. Now, of course, you haven't had as much time to prepare as you want. Things got away from you and you're doing the best you can. And in situations like these, when you haven't really prepared a lot, many speakers go into true confessions mode, where they start talking about all the problems they had in coming up with things and apologizing to the audience because they didn't have more time to prepare. They say things like, "Gosh, folks, I'm sorry the time got away from me. I would have loved to prepare a really long time for this thing, but unfortunately, I just had a couple hours. Now, I know I can hit the high points and what's important, and I might not cover everything or touch on it as interestingly as you might like, and maybe if I had a little more time I could do that, but we'll just see how things go. We'll kind of wing it and just see what comes out the other end. I'm sure everything will be fine. Again, sorry I didn't have more time to go over this." Wrong. Avoid that true confessions mode. The moment you find yourself going up there and thinking, "I'd better explain why this presentation isn't any better," stop. If that thought goes through your head, just stop until it's out of your head. It's okay if you have a little pause. Get people interested. Pull them into your speech. Nothing the matter with pauses. You don't want to spend all that valuable speech time you have explaining to people why you didn't prepare and they're not getting everything they want. Instead, you want to focus on what they are getting and why it's important and why they need to pay attention. Now, of course, to make this happen, you need to prepare just a little bit your introduction. Introduction's a big, fancy word. The advertising industry has a better word for it. They call it the grabber. Somebody just grabs a hold of your audience. Some sort of shocking fact. Like, did you know that right now? Maybe it's a quote from somebody interesting. Or a quote from somebody you've heard that you thought was interesting. Maybe it's just a question. Question for the audience. Have you ever thought about, or think about this. Have you ever, did you ever, what happened when you, all those are questions. Or maybe it's just putting facts out there in front of the audience. Or a prop. An interesting prop can do it too. But whatever you do, use that time and use it well. You've only got a certain amount of time to use, a very small amount of time. You want to use it well. You don't have much time to prepare. The grabber is absolutely important. More important, in fact, than what you're going to say. Because if you grab people at the beginning, you got them all the way through the speech. They're interested, and they will keep listening. But you got to grab them. That means you also need to be aware of your audience. Different audiences, different grabbers. Depending on what your audience is interested in, what they're focused on, determines what grabber you use. If you have a business audience, maybe certain grabbers you want to use. If you're using for entertainment audience, maybe you can go a little wilder, a little crazier. It all depends on your sense of the audience and what's going to work. So before you get so busy writing out all that stuff and figuring out what you're actually going to say, focus on the introduction. Focus on the grabber. How are you going to get that audience's attention? How are you going to grab that audience and pull them into your speech and get them so excited they're just dying to hear that next word from you? But now comes the easy part. Just talk about what you have to say. You got something to say? Now it's time to say it. Because, as I mentioned at the very beginning, if you don't have anything to say, you might as well not say anything. A lot of people, they go up there and they say, what am I going to say? I don't know anything, I don't know what to say. If you truly don't have anything to say, it's better just not to say anything. Tom Lear said it best. He said, there are people who bemoan the fact they can't communicate. They go on over and over about the fact that they can't communicate. I feel the very least that people who can't communicate can do is to shut up. So if you can't communicate, you might as well shut up. You got nothing to say. So don't bother trying to say anything. Now for the rest of you who think you actually do have something to say, that's all right. Then this part, as I said, should be very easy. Because all you're doing is talking about things you already know. Something you've studied a long time, something you understand, something you've been researching, something that's your hobby, something that you're passionate about, hopefully, you're interested in, you're knowledgeable. It should be no big deal doing the body of the speech, the heart of the speech itself. And if you flub up a little bit here, then don't let it bother you. Just speak through the thing. It's all right. Now, what happens to a lot of people is because they haven't prepared things, they freak themselves out. They get up on stage, and all of a sudden, all the stuff they know just vanishes from their mind. When you haven't had a lot of time to prepare, what you've got to do when you get on stage is remind yourself, you know this stuff. You study this stuff. It's in your head. It's right there. It's not going to go anywhere. So don't worry about it. It's all right. If you forget something, wait it out. Forget what you're going to say. Just wait a bit. It'll come back to you. So many times people say, what if they just waited it out? They'd sound like they know what they're talking about. And of course, that's really the point. Whether or not you know what you're talking about, at least sound like you know what you're talking about. So even if you haven't had a lot of time to prepare your speech, speak deliberately and carefully and slowly. And it'll help people understand what you're saying and convince them that you do know what you're talking about. Now, when you're speaking about something and you know something about it, and you're really certain about it, then it should be pretty easy to get from where you are all the way through it. Another common mistake that people make is they get up there and they're not quite sure what to say next. They're afraid they might make some sort of error. But it's all right. So you slip up, so you don't remember exactly what you're going to say. You don't pull out that exact fact that you were talking about. The great thing is your audience has no script. The audience has no idea what you were planning to say. So as long as everything you say kind of fits together, you should be fine. So as mentioned, the introduction of the speech catches the attention. Conclusion says where is the speech going? Where to go after that? And those are the parts people really care about. What's in the middle? Well, as long as it's okay, as long as it kind of moves along, isn't as important. I know it seems strange to say the body of your speech is not as important as the intro and the conclusion, but really that's the way it is. Intro and conclusion, you focus on the body of the speech as long as you have something to say. As long as you know what you're talking about, it should be no big deal. So don't worry about your body of your speech. relax and say the things that you know and understand and are passionate about. Now you come to your conclusion. Remember, your conclusion is one of the most important parts of your speech. And you're probably all thinking you know what the conclusion is. You may have heard this formula before. Tell them what you're going to tell them, tell them what you told them. So the conclusion is that tell them what you told them part. Right? Wrong. If all you're going to do at the conclusion is simply tell them what you told them, then you might not as well bother. Hey, if they haven't got it yet, if they can't remember anything yet, they're not going to remember anything anyway. You can tell them what you told them. What they're going to think in their head is, so what? I got it. I know. That's your point. Blah, 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 blah. That's your point. What do I care? What does it matter? And that's the point. What does it matter? If you simply have a conclusion that says, well, here's what everything I said summed up, what does it really matter to the audience? What do they care? For your conclusion to be effective and powerful, you have to tell them what the next steps are. How can the audience use what you have or apply what you have some way in their life? Because hopefully you have a goal for this speech. Even if you're just telling a story, you still have a goal, a purpose, a reason you told the story, a reason you gave the speech. If you're simply speaking to inform, you might as well not give the speech. If your whole purpose of the speech is simply to say, hey, here's some things you might want to be aware of, there are much better ways doing things in this speech. Much better ways. You don't want to use a speech. You can email people, or put it on a website or a blog. You can bump into them and mention it when you see them. Hey, here's some things you might want to know about. But a speech, a formal presentation, now that's something special. That forces people to focus on you and your message. And if there's no point, there's no reason for it, people will get upset because you're wasting their time. There has to be a reason for that speech, and that's what you put in the conclusion. Are you selling something? Tell them how they can get it, where they can purchase it, why it's so important for them to purchase it. Are you giving them information about an upcoming rule change? Let them know when the rule goes into effect and what will happen if they don't follow the rule. Maybe you just want to motivate them to be better. Tell them what they need to do. What are their next steps? How can they apply all the stuff you've been talking about in their life? You see, the introduction gets them hooked. Conclusion tells them what they need to do next. If you have a speech and nobody needs to do anything next, if there's no next steps, there's nothing that comes after it, just wanted to let you know you're wasting your time and you're wasting their time. You're wasting your breath. Don't even bother. Just forget it. Speech has to have a conclusion. So think about where they're going to go next. What are they going to do next? Now, of course, for this speech, you've had a very short time to prepare. So really focus in on this. Why am I giving this speech? What do I expect to get people to do after they hear this speech? What's the point of giving a speech as opposed to emailing or putting in a blog or a website? Answer all those questions and put all that in your conclusion. So in your conclusions, you'll wrap things up. Tell them what you talked about, some of the important things, all the points you had all the way along. But you'll also tell them what comes next and what needs to be done and why they should care about it. There you have it. What to do when you need to create a speech, but you don't have a lot of time. The good news is you don't have to worry about the speech itself. That'll take care of itself. What you focus on is the beginning, the introduction, and the conclusion. You get those solid, you get those interesting, and your speech should be just fine. Now, when we say introduction, remember, it's not just about telling them what you're going to tell them. That's boring. You want to hook them. A better word instead of introduction is the grabber. What's going to grab people? What's going to get their attention? What's going to get them focused in on your message right here, right now? We talked about several things. You might use quotes. You might use a shocking statistic or fact. Here's a question to pull them in. Might just start out with a bunch of general facts that relate to them, that they understand. Facts that help put complex ideas into very simple, easy to understand terms. However you do it, the goal is to grab them. Grab them, get a hold of them. That's what you do at the beginning. And then you got the speech itself. No big deal, provided you know what you're talking about. If you don't know what you're talking about, well, you might as well just stop. Stop right now. There's no point getting up there and talking about something you don't know anything about. Instead, find something you're interested in and you're passionate about. If you're passionate about it, excited about it, that will take you through the whole speech. You'll pull in enough facts, enough ideas as you go along, you'll be fine. Now, don't apologize and explain that, oh, I had no time to prepare. Nobody needs to know that. Nobody cares. All they want to know is, how good is this speech you're giving going to be? That's what they're all about. Then, of course, there's the conclusion. Now, quite often, in the fashion of tell them what you're going to tell them, the conclusion is described as tell them what you told them. Well, that's part of the conclusion, but if all you do at the end is saying, well, here's what I told you, you're wasting time. There are better ways to get information to people than just simply telling them and then telling what you told them. Do a blog. Get on the internet. Send them an email. No, this is a presentation. So when it finishes, you want people to go somewhere, to do something with that information. You aren't just informing them, you're informing them with purpose, with a reason. And if you don't have a reason to give the speech, again, better simply not to give it at all. So after you finish the conclusion, there has to be something that comes up next. And the point of this speech, the reason for you going all the way through this stuff is not just to learn a bunch of things about, oh, introduction, conclusion, grabber. No, if you're actually going out there and you're going to be in a situation where you're going to do off-the-cuff speeches, or you don't think you're going to have enough time to plan for your next speech, at least practice the introduction. Practice the grabber. Take any subject you want, any subject you're interested in, and practice writing a grabber for it. Get attention. And then, practice writing a conclusion. Practice writing an end part. So when it finishes things and takes it to another level. Hearing about it on TV is fine. Reading about it is fine. But you really have to practice it if you're going to get better. So now that you know how to do a speech like that, with a powerful introduction, a powerful conclusion. Practice it. Work on it. So the next time you're called up to do a speech at the last moment, you'll be ready and waiting and nail that speech.